Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Mobilising Exeter's Community Enterprising Spirit, the event series. My name is Daphne van Run, and I am co-hosting this event with Nic Eversett from Canopy Community, who is tonight on mission control. We so appreciate you taking the time, creating that time in your calendar, space in your minds to be here tonight. And what Paul White said a little bit earlier, it's actually quite a good night to be inside. It's stormy and rainy, at least here. This first evening on Mobilising Exeter's Community Enterprising Spirit is all about food, locally grown food and access to healthy food for all Exeter residents. We have a great lineup of contributors tonight who will provide the context for us to go into creative conversations and solutions in the second part of the evening and dive deeper into local food systems and food in the community. So I thought I'd provide a little bit of background as how this event series has come about. I think it started during the first lockdown. So the first lockdown in April 2020. Colab Exeter, Exeter Community Initiatives and Essence, Exeter's social enterprise network, came together to join forces in understanding how we can support communities during and beyond the current health crisis, whilst being aware of the limitations of our current economic model and also of the climate emergency. And we worked on the premise that if we're serious about supporting communities, then we might have to entertain the following definition of community. And this definition is borrowed from CLES, the Centre of Local Economic Strategies, and I find it quite apt that the community is not merely a consumer of services. They can be a leader, an innovator, a wealth builder, and a valuable contributor, an important co-designer in policy decisions in the new economy. If we're serious about community groups continuing to deliver food, medications, and other welfare and enterprising activities, then we also need to embrace the concept of community enterprise. Community enterprise as a vehicle for community groups to continue to deliver those essential services. What do we mean with community enterprise? It's a social enterprise that trades within a geographical area with a defined interest group and sometimes both. But it also brings us, what is a social enterprise? Because that might not to all of you be apparent. Simply put, a social enterprise is a business that trades to tackle social problems, improve communities, people's life chances, and the environment. So social enterprises are working to make a bigger difference and reinvesting their profits to make more, and to make better. They are not investor-led enterprises, and they're also not voluntary organizations. So sometimes it's easier to define something what is it not than what it is. Also, if you're serious with Mobilising Exeter's Community Enterprising Spirit, we were really serious about having a joined-up approach between the various organizations within the voluntary, community, social enterprising and charitable sector. And generally, we want to see more connectedness between business, local residents, academia, local government, residents, and those organizations. And hence this event series, because where do we need to meet? We need to meet somewhere. Together, all of this resulted in a joint position statement. And this can be summarized as follows. The key to mobilizing Exeter's community enterprising spirit is not just in how communities are supported financially. It is also, more importantly, about how they can be helped to connect and collaborate in order to meet the communal needs of a place. Through this, we achieve a joined-up approach that builds back better by solving what are often related social, economic, and ecological issues and challenges. Now you see a few logos underneath that. So Exeter Community Initiatives I've already mentioned. That's a charity that helps people facing inequality, homelessness, and coping on a low income. Carole Pilley is here tonight. I'm really pleased with that. ECI is housed within Colab, and Colab Exeter is the well-being hub on King William Street. And we're very pleased to have Fiona Carden and Amanda Kilroy leading on this project with us. I think both send their apologies, unfortunately, tonight. And lastly, Essence, Exeter Social Enterprise Network. We're pleased to have Paul White, acting chair, tonight here with us. And we are supported by SIMPL. SIMPL is a project that funds this activity, and it's a project about how we can better use social investment. Well, tonight we kick off this series with the theme of local food production, food distribution, and better access for all. I am so pleased to have the following lineup of contributors to introduce to you. So, Carole will be speaking on thriving, enterprising communities. She will provide that context, what asset-based community development is and where this is working in Exeter. Secondly, we'll have Paul White providing a context on the landscape of voluntary community, social enterprise and charitable activity in Exeter. Thirdly, we will hear from Rebecca Sandover from Food Exeter, a charity working towards sustainable and healthy food for all in the Greater Exeter area. She will dive into the power of local food systems. And last, we will conclude with Parker Cheng and Gabriella Wong from the Urban Mushroom Company. They provide a real-life example of a local food business. They are a social enterprise and they concentrate on urban growing with an innovative business model. Great. Well, that's them. Let me do that. The second part of the evening is about all of us exploring what else and more we could be doing in the area of food, local food in Exeter. At the end of the evening, I hope we have inspired you with some of the good stuff that is happening, and hopefully new and perhaps unlikely conversations have taken place. Just so you know, rest assured, we're keen to support people also after today. We are intending to have these events once a month. So in between events, we have a few ways for you to get stuck in and perhaps take joint action together. Now, I was wondering, before we start, are there any questions that any of you have on this event right now? Just looking at the chat here. I think that's okay. Nic, just barge in if you need to.
Keeping an eye that, yeah, just drop something in the chat if you've got a question.
Yeah. And if you've not done so already, just introduce yourself in the chat as well. That's really, really welcome. All right. Well, without further ado, I will hand over the proverbial mic to Carole, who will set the context for an approach to empower communities and give some examples of socially enterprising activity on a community level. She will give a high-over perspective on this topic, as will the other contributors. And then there's, after that 5-minute share, there will be a couple of minutes for you to ask questions. But again, there will be room in the breakout sessions in the second part of the evening to dive deeper into specific parts of these contributors from the four parties I've just outlined. Carole, would you like to take the proverbial mic and kick off with your contribution?
Thank you, Daphne.
You're welcome.
Yes, so my name is Carole. I'm Development Manager with Exeter Community Initiatives, and community development has always been part of ECI's work. However, it wasn't until we employed a community organiser and established the Listening Project that we moved into using an asset-based community development approach. So following on from that project, we got funding for employing community builders, and this was part of a partnership project that became Wellbeing Exeter. So that combines community-based development to build community resilience, along with social prescribing work. And we currently have 12 community builders working in the 13 wards of Exeter. So, why do you want asset-based approach? So a traditional community development tends to focus on problems as the impetus for action. And the community development worker is often key to making things happen. So it follows a deficit model and can reinforce division of them and us. So in contrast, by using an asset-based approach, we're concerned with using strengths, passions as the starting point for enabling greater connection, activity, and collective support. So it's about building a much richer associational life within a community. And there's evidence that's emerging in areas that have been hardest hit by COVID at the moment, that those with good social capital have really managed better than other areas. So in the asset-based approach, we're addressing questions about, how do we establish relationships about the co-creation of power? How can the relationship support people to be human beings rather than a service user or a client? So that's a really key element of an asset-based approach. It's trying to build that space of the citizen, of the resident, and kind of push back against services and that institutionalizing of people. So asset-based approaches start from seeing people as having capacity, and then they have a distinctive process, and it's very clear about power. So in terms of capacity, what we're interested in is the gifts that people are born with, their giveaways, the things that when you're in flow, that element of you being in flow is a good example of a gift. We're interested in the skills and the passions that people bring. So in terms of a process, we're trying to discover about people, their lives, what's important to them, their environments, their culture. So, it's one question is, what is important enough to you that you would be prepared to take action on? And then another part of the process is about that connection, because connection builds control. And there's something about increasing people's sense of agency that adds to their well-being. So then the next step of the process is about mobilization. And in terms of power, the first element really is, your primary locus. Then this level is local, but it's not in the control of the community. And then there will be external power. So the starting point is about citizen-led action. And we start from that place of conversations with residents to find out what's important to them, what is it that they would like to see happening. So, in terms of examples, I think that, that there's all sorts of things that are very small that happen, have come out of this process, but they're all really important to people. So, where people are able to step forward and do things that, start growing vegetables and things within the street planters. So all of those sorts of small things where they've been overgrown or whatever, that they can suddenly, that it's important to them and they can take control over. So there's an element in this process where you start to unpick what people don't feel that they have permission to do a number of things. So that's an early stage, really, when you start to unpick that. So the process, in a way, of the community development work that we do is about hatching this sense of community, this sense that people can do things, and just to kind of make sure that that people feel confident to take action themselves, because in the longer term that makes it much more sustainable, rather than coming along and saying, well, we're going to do this project and then we run it for a few years and the funding runs out and then it disappears. That whatever emerges and comes up has that potential to be sustained. So some of the things that are more on the community enterprise side have been like newsletters, where residents have been able to sell advertising in order to make the money, in order to be able to print newsletters for their areas. And this has happened in several areas of the city. And then there's other sorts of conversations go on about, a disused shop or other things like that. So there's all sorts of potentials that are around, but it has to be that the action comes from the people themselves, rather than it being led. So, that's the essence of what an asset-based approach is. And it is, I just wanted to give you an example of a way in which it's challenging at times to to hold the thinking of asset-based approach. It's easier to step back into a deficit model, and we see this particularly at the moment, a lot of helping the needy. So, you know, at the moment you can't go a week without hearing about tackling loneliness, the problem of loneliness, but it's characterised in a them, the lonely, and us, the not lonely way, a deficit way. And it's an individual's problem, and solutions are schemes to hand out activity packs or phone people and so on. So that's again the deficit model, not taking account of environment, economy, culture, and overlooking, in this case, a second malady, which is uselessness. So when you take an asset-based community development approach and address these in a local context, you don't have a loneliness problem, you have a community problem. So, you know, the question, you know, is how do we, as a community, enable people to feel that they matter and have a contribution to make? So the same is very much true of food poverty. It isn't that individual's problem that they don't have enough food. It's us as a community and the way in which we distribute and are able to share and feed each other. So if we're holding true to an asset-based approach, we take that as a community problem, not an individual problem. So I shall stop there.
Thank you, Carole. Yes, that's great. I'm inviting people to ask questions and just put them in the chat so we can pick them out if you have any. I'm just touched by what you're saying, because it just, for me, it brings in that we look at humans, the wholesomeness of humans, and that we start with that. And the confidence and the empowerment of that is just like that. That's where it starts and that's where it ends. Like that's for me so clear. I am just looking around, everyone. Well, you've been just very clear, Carole, and it's been a brilliant base for which to build the rest of the conversation on. And I'm so pleased we could start with you, because this is for me the starting point and the end point, like I said. So if you do have questions, don't hesitate to pop them up later. That's all good. We can come back to that. And like I said, Carole will be available to also join the breakout room. So you can dive deeper into asset-based community development and how ECI is doing that and how you could start something in your neighborhood, etc., later on in the second part of the evening. Paul, would you be ready to engage us from a more maybe quantitative perspective on what the current ecosystem of food producers and food distribution activity looks like in the Exeter area?
Yeah, okay. I'm going to also talk just a little bit broader than Exeter, because in reality, obviously, a lot of food production happens out of the outskirts and outside of Exeter across rural Devon, but that production in itself plays an important role in what happens within the city in terms of how people gain access to food. So really building from what Carole was talking about there around the asset-based community development and trying to understand the range of assets that are out there, and assets by assets, sorry, we mean charity, voluntary community and social enterprise. So generally the not-for-profit sector. And I'm pleased to say that despite what you might read in the news, that it's a very benevolent society that we're living in. There's a fantastic array of individuals doing really creative and positive things at a social and at a community level, and delivering extraordinary value, social value, all across the country. The profile for Exeter, and some data analysis that we've been doing, we've discovered 638 organisations, 276 are classified as social enterprises versus 366 that we classify as charity and voluntary community type organisations. And that's just between the EX1 and the EX4 postcodal areas of the city. So there is a much larger pool of organisations engaged on a not-for-profit basis across the county. Of those organisations, 93% are what we can classify as being engaged on early intervention and prevention type activities. So rather than being potentially care providers who are dealing with individuals who have an issue or a condition that needs support and assistance, A lot are dealing with issues at a very, very early stage and have the opportunity of potentially or are addressing the solving of problems at a very early stage. And that's an enormously positive thing, obviously, for the whole of the city and indeed the whole of the country. A surprising figure that came out of the analysis is that the annual turnover of all those organisations, those 600 organisations, exceeds 300 million. And of course, the largest percentage of that income or turnover is on donations from the public. Overall and nationally, the figure exceeds 70 billion every year that's donated to charitable and not-for-profit causes. So it's a very large sector. And the other side of it, in terms of its economic contribution, 6,000 people across the city are employed directly by those organisations on paid work, with up to another 10,000 employed on a voluntary basis. So again, that's a very significant pool of resource, and on average, just over 55% reported their numbers. So that's actually like the number of people engaged in social value delivery is probably much, much greater than we understand. So one of the purposes is, as was highlighted both in Carole's talk and originally in the presentation from Daphne, of doing the analysis, was to try to see what we could do to get some increased connectivity and engagement between the groups in the way that they're servicing communities. And Carole hit the nail on the head, really, in terms of trying to get it to look at it from a place and a community basis. So that what we're doing is we're bringing all the resources together to try to maximise the benefits that those individual institutions are delivering. When we look at food across Devon, so if I expand that, there's over 3,000 organisations, not-for-profits. Annual turnover increases to about 1.5 billion. That includes Plymouth and Torbay areas, so those are obviously very large areas. And the number of volunteers or people engaged through those institutions exceeds 20,000. Narrowing it down into food, circa 2,000 to 3,000 people are engaged in food production, supply, management in one way or another all across the county. Turnover is circa around 17 million, but probably a little bit more based on the fact that we've got some gaps in the data. And I've identified about 95 organisations, 15 across Exeter and 80, as you not surprisingly appreciate, more in the rural areas of the county. And there's a whole range of different services as well provided. Obviously, there's a large number of young farmers clubs and institutions that are supporting the next generation of farming community development. There are production and education services around products, including education services that are helping other disadvantaged younger people, for example, become introduced to farming and food production as an opportunity. We even have a specialist provider of knowledge and information on plant science. So we have potentially an institution that we could tap into there to actually help us look at the way we're growing things and see what we could do to perhaps improve those sorts of things. Providers of development and of nutritional supplements through campaigners that are focused on fair trade and food production in other countries. So we're not just even trying to solve problems in Devon. We've got institutions that are looking well beyond Devon to the other side of the world to provide us food for our nation. And then, food distribution and how do we get it around, including everything again from, food banks to help people most in need through to retail outlets that are helping to drive potential for a circular economy and procurement of goods and services that are produced in Devon, that are sold to Devon people and consumed, and that helps generate a circular economy approach to how we're handling that. And as you can imagine, a large number of the community shops that you might pop into if you're travelling around Devon are actually cooperatives or social enterprises. They're not necessarily for-profit businesses. So there's an enormous amount there to build on, and that was what really encouraged me in the context of what we're focusing on tonight. There's definitely lots and lots and lots of really good, innovative and socially stimulating things that we could do. I think in that if we can pull our brains and our resources and start to narrow in on the need. So That's me. A lot of figures there. I'm more than happy. I'm sure we'll be sharing some information afterwards, but hopefully that's encouraged you to realise that whatever you come up with, there's a target audience out there for it, for sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Actually, I'll just jump in. Someone's just asked, where is this analysis? Is that available anywhere, Paul?
So it's very much sort of a work in progress thing. So we will be publishing component parts of it, and obviously as part of the event series, because we're focusing on specific streams like this, then of course what we'll do is we'll publish this and put it into the public domain so that people can use it for their own purposes and good effect, hopefully in building on this conversation tonight.
Absolutely. Very useful information. Very useful.
Yes, that was Roxy. I was saying, thanks, Paul. So yes, you might be marveled like me about all the figures, but I guess like why do we bring in this perspective? It is when we talk about transforming ways with how we do things. It's often we bring in that we need to have the whole system in the room to see which connections we can make, we can build on what's already there, and maybe what gaps there are when you look at it from more of a mapping point of view. And having some quantitative data like Paul is presenting is highly useful, because there's actually contact details behind that. So we could actually target people in a particular area that have already an activity around food and link them up with people that want to do something with food. So that's kind of in layperson talk how I would like to use those figures. Paul, maybe you want to add to that?
Yes, certainly, and certainly in the background to these event series. That's very much what effort with the partners that Daphne highlighted earlier on. That's exactly what we're looking to do now, is bring some greater connectivity, some increased productivity and efficiency by people joining up. And then through that, we'll probably be able to address a much broader range of challenges that exist out there, because the resources are actually there. They're just not necessarily recognising the need and fitting the need with the resource that we've got. So that's very much a role that we're trying to fulfil in our capacity as Essence as a social network provider and networker.
Brilliant. Thank you, Paul. Again, Paul will be available for a breakout later on, so he'll be able to bring in his perspective, maybe just repeat some of those figures again for us, for who wants. I would like to go to Rebecca from Food Exeter. I did write a short introduction to you. Oh, let me see. There we are. What I loved about getting you on here is that Carole was kind enough to put us in touch with you. And what I love about us being able to talk about Food Exeter and the new initiative that is going to get relaunched as well is that it's actually a tangible collaborative effort towards local food production and distribution. So in some ways, this series, what this is about, this is already happening, and it would be great how we connect more people into that and how we could expand and strengthen that. So over to you. Give us some overview about Food Exeter and yourself. That'd be much appreciated.
Thanks very much, Daphne. Yeah, I'm very pleased to be able to speak here tonight. It's a fascinating event, and yeah, I think I can certainly speak to some of the themes that Carole and Paul has already raised. So I'm a trustee of Food Exeter, but I'm also a research fellow at the University of Exeter, and I've conducted some research around fair access to food and the sustainable food networks in Devon, plus other projects. So I think, like Paul was saying, there's so much going on. Devon has a huge wealth of innovation around food, and it is very place-based. So, but I'm very much tonight going to focus on the work going on with Food Exeter and the new initiative of Good Food Exeter. But I'm happy to speak a bit more about some of these wider perspectives around Devon if other people would like me to later on, or perhaps in the breakouts. So Food Exeter was established in 2014, and as other people have talked about, it very much was a community collaboration, the people coming together and identifying a need. And so it was very much a small group, a small network for a number of years. And Carole was very much part of that, ECI. We had, in the early days, we had Martin Goss from the diocese was coordinating and leading this network, very much in conversation with Exeter Food Bank, and trying to bring together the energy around local food in the city. So as Food Exeter has developed, in 2019, we became a charity. And in the summer, we also held our first AGM. So it's exciting to see how things are developing. So I just wanted to give a very brief overview. We've kind of got three main strands of our work. So we focus on food in community, which I'll talk about a little bit in a moment. So that could be community cafes, people holding lunches, things like that. So things sort of more from a food education point of view, and thinking about how we can boost education around good food in the city. As lots of people will be aware, issues around fair access to good food has become a massive topic over the last decade, I would say. And we've certainly seen the impacts of welfare reform and precarious employment has resulted in a huge rise in food poverty. And we've worked very closely with the food bank, trying to support them in certain ways. And just, I think very much Food Exeter see themselves as a backbone organisation, where we try and link people up together to really harness the energy and try and sort of not to replicate what other people are doing, so that we can really boost the capacity for good food in the city and harness the energy of people trying to create a food change. So we've got food in community, fair access to food, and the other strand is the local food economy. So obviously we've had partners from Food Exeter. One of our key members is Dominic Atland, who was involved in setting up the Real Food store. So, and we've got Martin Bragg from Shillingford Organics has been very involved with us. The people from West Town Farm. So really dynamic, innovative action going on the edge of the city, trying to really create opportunities for excellent, climate-friendly, biodiverse food production. But obviously we're a city, and although we would really like to see urban growing going on in the city, that is definitely an area for an opportunity to be boosted, hopefully in the future. We're very much trying to bring all these excellent food products into the city, and just gathering my thoughts. In 2020, some members of Food Exeter set up Good Food Exeter, which is an online farmers market. And it was set up at the same time as COVID hit. So originally it was going to be a physical market, and some of my colleagues had put in an awful lot of groundwork to, it was going to be set up at America Hall, and bringing together some of the wealth of excellent food products from the greater Exeter region and wider, so from Devon mostly. And with the impact of COVID-19, it ended up being turned into an online farmers market. And initially, we had some funding from the Sustainable Food Places Network, Veg Cities funding, to help set it up. And it was a great initiative And I think it produced a really valuable resource at the time of the first lockdown. But unfortunately, I think colleagues found that it was actually very time. It was quite a time. Sorry.
Time intensive. Labour intensive. Yes.
Thank you very much. Yes, it was very time intensive, and it was a huge learning curve. And things. So they decided in the summer to have a pause and to review the operation and to think about how to run it again. So Good Food Exeter have had some new funding from Sustain for as a good food movement, and is actually being launched this Saturday. Will be the first online farmers market from this current phase, and it's very exciting. The range of products, the range of producers, from really, really micro scale producers producing perhaps some local honey, right through to our St Sidwell's Bakehouse, fantastic sourdough bread. And the other exciting thing, we think about being climate friendly right across the board. Most of the delivery, 90% of the delivery, is going to be by e-cargo bikes. So that's a real opportunity, and we're really hoping that this is going to be a real resource for the city and help to bring some of our fantastic local producers into the heart of the city for the community. So that's Good Food Exeter. But I'd also like to just say there's a huge wealth of opportunity for local food social enterprises in Exeter. We carried out some research, I think in 2019, where we looked at community cafes, and they're such an important resource for in our neighbourhoods. Carole was talking earlier about issues of loneliness and issues of food poverty, and a really well-functioning community cafe can be a massive asset for people perhaps struggling or feeling isolated. But we found that the existing community cafes are really struggling. They're completely running on volunteer energy. They're completely dependent on the capacity of volunteers and on very small budgets. So we kind of think this is a real area that's ripe for a social enterprise or two. And our research also showed that a food hub, if we think about a food hub, a community food hub could be a major player in making a difference in neighbourhoods. If we think about St Sidwell's, which we would say is the only food hub in the city, they offer community cooking classes, they offer community growing classes, they have a community cafe. Obviously, I'm talking about in a non-COVID context, but so they're really they use some produce from Exeter Food Action, so they're repurposing some surplus food. So in a way, a community food hub has so much potential to make a difference in the city. And at the moment, we've only got one that is operating really well. But we kind of think this is another area that would be ripe for more input and more some in different neighbourhoods. It could be a real resource for the city. So that's an overview of Food Exeter and our sister organisation. I hope I've made that clear. Good Food Exeter is a sister organisation because Food Exeter is a charity, and Good Food Exeter is our sort of operating arm, and we're hoping it's going to go from strength to strength. But just another last point I'd like to make is that we also have a vision for linking up local enterprises around food in the city in the form of a local food centre, which could be a hub for people to could be a distribution hub for local enterprises in the city. And we've been working on that for a while now, and we're hoping that will become a reality.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Rebecca. Gosh, there's lots of things cooking, to just stay in the metaphor. I wonder if anybody wants to ask some questions. I saw one question.
Yeah, there's one from Andrea. Daphne.
Yes.
It says, it sounds like you need more volunteers, Rebecca. Oh.
We massively need more volunteers. I think that is become a bit of an issue because we've got very limited capacity. We've got 3 trustees, and I would say, although I'm a trustee, I'm very much in the background. I answer emails, I go to meetings. I'm not really a hands-on person, whereas the other trustees are much more hands-on. Then wider than that, we've got a number of sort of long-term supporters who dip in and out with their expertise, like Dominic and Martin. And then we've got a coordinator, Julie Smith, but unfortunately we've got very small budget, so Julie's only able to work a small part of the week. And we have 1 or 2 volunteers who come and go, but yeah, we certainly could do with some volunteers. And I think a real gap that I particularly bang on about is we could do with some real support around social media. We're not very active on Twitter, and I think that could be good for us.
Great. Well, I always love that dare to ask, I think, is that. There's an ask here around volunteers, and particularly with social media capacity. I might be able to link you to somebody as well. So I'll just make a note of that.
I think one thing is probably worth adding as well, in that it's quite often that people think of social enterprise in the context of a single business, but cooperatives are a very good social enterprise variant of the model, where when you're looking at cafe institutions potentially around different communities, they could operate as components of a larger cooperative. And so the burden of running the business and the burden of trying to administer everything can be shared collectively then across multiple, from a single central point with multiple organizations. And that makes it a little bit easier to implement. And it's the same as sort of the production. So I just wanted to flag that as there's quite a variation in the models that can be employed to do some of the things, that you guys might be thinking of doing. And then the other bit I think is a very important one that Rebecca raised, is that as part of the analysis, one of the difficulties was discovering what's out there. It is actually quite difficult. A lot of people and a lot of the investment goes into people type activities and not the buying of technology and social media sites and websites and all those things, for very good reason. So there's a need for us to think about how do we better expose what's actually going on out there, because there is some fantastic stuff going on.
Great, we've got thanks for that. We've got another couple of great questions in the chat. One's from Chris Gunson, who says, how did you get such a great range of products? Because it sounds like you've got loads of stuff going on.
I would have to put that down to like I say, I've got much more hands-on colleagues, plus Julie Smith, our coordinator. I think Julie has got a passion for community growing, and well, I would say we've all got a passion for local food. So Julie's just been on the case. And I think, that because a lot of us who've been involved with Food Exeter have been around on the scene for a while, we're sort of quite aware of different organisations that have been set up and the opportunities. And I think it's through our membership. And like I say, as a backbone organisation, we're able to reach out and link up with a range of great organisations. So it's kind of like getting grassroots intelligence, really.
Absolutely. And people that are already involved for decades and just have a very extensive network, it always helps. I would love to ask more and know more and respond more. We will definitely link you up with some volunteering opportunities, Rebecca, both from Andrea and from myself. I would like to go to the last contributor for tonight. So Parker and Gabriella, and you also have one of your team, Clara, on standby to bring a dose of innovation, really, because one of the ways that we maybe get stuck is when we don't have enough volunteers. And how do we move from a model that is dependent on volunteers to perhaps a business model that incorporates the values that the volunteers set out with, also known as a social enterprise model? So Parco and Gabriella, please share us a little bit of light on the Urban Mushroom Company that you are currently actually in. We're in a farm right now. Take us to the farm.
So yeah, hi everybody. My name's Parker. I'm one of the co-directors of the Urban Mushroom Company. As Daphne said, I'm joined by Gabby and Clara. Do you want to quickly say hi, Gabby?
Hi, I'm Gabriella. I'm a third-year philosophy student in the University of Exeter.
And yeah, hi, I'm Clara.
Perfect. Yeah, so UMC, Urban Mushroom Company, and who we are essentially. So we were formed in 2018, and we are a student-led project created from the University of Exeter. And we are now currently based in Princess Hay, so quite centrally locally, which is quite convenient. The main aims of our social enterprise is to reduce coffee waste and to also ease unemployment. We reduce coffee waste by using this as a material to grow ready-to-fruit mushroom boxes, and we're also prototyping like other mushroom-related products. So, for example, we have like dried mushrooms we prototyped, and we've also got a couple other things that we're testing in the process. And our process allows us to incorporate a social element into our social enterprise. And for this, we're focusing on running educational workshops in primary schools surrounding all the research and knowledge we've got in food waste and sustainability. And in the future, we're also aiming to support disadvantaged individuals and create a program of work experience and workshops to support them get job opportunities.
So now we'll talk about one of a very often overlooked problem. As you know, it has always been part of our habit to drink coffee, but the problem of coffee waste is always overlooked. In the UK, 95 million cups of coffee per day are consumed, and 99% of the coffee beans go to landfill. This creates 500,000 tons of coffee waste each year, along with potent methane gases. Used coffee grounds are still nutritious and can be upcycled in many ways. And our primary focus in UMC is to use coffee grounds as a medium to grow mushrooms. Although they are nutritious, they're usually too acidic to be composted. So after they're used to grow mushrooms, the acidity can be neutralized and they can be suitable to compost. And this allows us to follow closer to a circular business model. In case you're not sure what the term means, it means that all waste is converted back to raw materials and reincorporated back into the same cycle or another cycle so that there is no waste.
Perfect. So how we do this can be summed up in this diagram essentially. So firstly, we collect used coffee grounds from cafes locally around Exeter. Like I said, we're quite lucky that we're quite in the centre of Exeter, so we do this by bike and we also do it by foot, so we can collect coffee from just local coffee shops and bring it to Princess Hay. Once we brought it here, we'll do the typical mushroom, we'll mix it and we'll leave it in the incubation room for a bit. And then once the bags have incubated, we sell a portion of these, but we also keep a portion ourselves and we fruit these. And with the fruited bags, we then take these to compost. And so this creates a circular model and therefore reducing our waste essentially. And yeah, as mentioned, we're based in Princess Hay, which are office spaces, but we've adapted them so they're suitable for our process essentially. So currently Gabby is in our mixing room, where we would take the used coffee grounds and pressure cook them, which you can just see behind her. And that's where we make them sterile. And then we'll mix the mushroom spawn in, which is called mycelium. And then once they're packaged and in their bags, we will then take them to the incubation room where I am now. And this room has been adapted. So it was office spaces, but the rooms and the windows have all been insulated. And so it creates the correct temperature to grow our mushrooms essentially. And then we have another adapted room, which is next door, which is more for the conditions for the actual fruiting process itself. Yeah, so I'm going to pass on to Clara now, who has experience working in an urban farm, and so she can just give you a little bit more and show you another example of urban farming, essentially.
Yeah, hello. So I'm Clara, and I'm just going to talk about my experience of working at an urban farm in summer. So this farm was based in Liverpool. It was a vertical farm which grew lettuce and a couple herbs, and it was called Farm Urban. So this farm is actually currently located in the city Liverpool, in a basement of a school, so like a functioning school, and the building was actually a former sugar processing factory. So they've located it in a completely disused part of the city. And this farm is actually currently a fully functioning business with a stable consumer base. So they have managed to find customers and find a community that are willing to support them and buy their products weekly, as well as also selling one-off boxes. So this company, and because they grow vertically, so the lettuce and the herbs, they use 90% less water, they use no pesticides, function on zero waste, so everything gets either donated, all the excess, or packaging and things get recycled, and we actually bring the packaging back to the to the base to clean and then actually reuse. So in their model, and nothing goes to waste and everything gets recycled. And in terms of the community focus, they have a project called Green for Goods. So they work alongside FareShare in Liverpool, although I do believe that is a UK-wide enterprise. But they work alongside FareShare, donating a lot of food to more vulnerable communities within Liverpool, and particularly over lockdown. And I know they donated a lot to schools in more vulnerable areas and where there's a lot of food insecurity. And they also donated a lot of produce to the Whitechapel Centre, which is Liverpool's biggest homeless shelter. And they had a lot of connection with them, so that's definitely a big part of their business. And then they also do, not anymore as such, but they were doing a lot of workshops for children and young people, and hopefully after Corona's over, they are going to continue going into schools, although they have been moving that online. But they've been doing a lot of educating, especially in the local children's hospital, Alder Hey. So essentially that is a quick rundown of the place that I worked at over summer. But it's very interesting, and like I said, this is probably just the beginning. So hopefully, we'll see more enterprises like this coming up soon.
Yeah, Farm Urban is really an inspiring example for us, and an example that we can aspire to. What we see here in our company and also Farm Urban is a possibility of repurposing vacant urban spaces in a meaningful way to support a close-knitted and sustainable community socially and environmentally. And this is a goal of our company, and I believe to be many social enterprises are striving for it.